Right, Kevin, good to see you again. We are continuing with the series on great Californian novels, and we're going to do The Day of the Locust by Nathanael West. Now, why is this book in the series on great Californian novels?
Why? Because the canon tells us that it is. And second of all, it's a very Hollywood novel.
Yeah.
And last novel we did was a Hollywood novel. So we're sticking with Hollywood novels. And in the era of the 30s and 40s, published 1939, The Day of the Locust, the author, Nathanael West.
Yeah. Well, remind readers of viewers of the canon. So this is a great Californian novel because number one,
Well, everyone comes from somewhere else,
yeah,
which is my condition for being in the canon of great LA novels. So we're narrowing it here. And number two, everyone's playing a role. That's the McAleer, the dual thesis of Kevin McAleer regarding a proper LA/Hollywood novel of mid-century. And this
yeah.
novel fulfills both those requirements.
And I added a third thing because last time we were talking about Sammy Glick, the terrible, despicable Hollywood producer. And I added narcissist. There's got to be a narcissist. So all the novels we have read in this series had a narcissist. There was the British narcissist in Evil in Wars, what the loved one, and Sammy Glick is a narcissist from New York who comes to Hollywood. Now in this one we have a female narcissist at least. Wouldn't you agree? Maybe some others.
Faye Greener, a very memorable character, I would argue, in 20th century American literature, right up there. Well, not quite right up there, but just behind Lady Brett Ashley of Hemingway.
Yeah.
His The Sun Also Rises. Also Daisy Buchanan, The Great Gatsby. She's definitely behind those two, but she is quite memorable, and I think West, he does his best writing in describing her.
Yeah. So let's talk about Faye Greener because she is the first female narcissist. We've talked about women a lot, and I did find myself reading Day of the Locust that I kept reflecting on how are women being portrayed. You had a lot of the same female role models here, vamps, uh, whores, and and despicable users. And Faye Greener is in a whole new class here. She is despicable. She is a despicable narcissist. This is, I think she is a good segue into the novel itself. And I quite like going into starting with a character in the case of this novel, because I find the novel quite incoherent. It's quite difficult to describe. Doesn't, I mean, the chapters jump, the narrative is very jumpy, and it's even difficult to know what the point of the novel is, apart from critiquing Hollywood and telling anecdotes about Hollywood and maybe settling some scores through these fictional characters. So let's start with Faye Greener. Uh, what you said, she's memorable. I've got some thoughts about why she's memorable. Give us some more thoughts about why you think she is memorable.
She's memorable because she is the perfect summary of every young woman, I think, probably at that time, from what I know of that period, who wanted to become an actress in Hollywood. She has stars in her eyes. She's got a nice figure. She's got a pretty face, and she thinks she's just one big breakaway from becoming a Hollywood star. So this illusion of success within her grasp. It's also a critique of the American dream, I think, this book, not only the Hollywood dream, and how those dreams are 99% of the time destined to fail. That's another big theme of West's, how the masses have been snookered by this idea of the land of opportunity, and that writ large in Hollywood, which is America and the American dream at an exponential level. But back to Faye Greener. She is really the focus of this story because she is the object of the love object of a number of men in the novel who sort of orbit around her, this Venus, uh, this femme fatale, really, because we'll get into that. But branching off from Faye, if I may, or do you want to keep with her for a moment?
Well, can I make some comments on Faye?
Yeah.
Just to complete the picture. So these are my personal comments, so you can disagree with them. Um, Again, I found myself reflecting back on other novels in this series. Faye Greener is she is exploiting other people and she is being exploited. So she's being exploited by Hollywood, but she's prepared to exploit other people to make it. And she's a bit nuts too. So she admits it. Early on, when we were introduced to her, actually, is when it's through her father. So her father is a bit nuts. He is this vaudeville actor who is selling silver polish door to door, but cannot resist acting out um, the vaudeville act as he's trying to do it. And he's trying to rip people off at the same time. So he is a despicable character, but he's also kind of tragic because he can't stop acting. And it's the lowest form of acting. It's slapstick comedy. So he's pretending to trip over invisible bumps in the ground, in the floor. And his face is all lined from excessive uh, overacting. His face, his forehead, and his smile lines, they're creased from excessive overacting. And so we meet him. So he's a bit nuts. She says he is nuts, and he's actually ill. She comes into the house while he's trying to rip off somebody. He faints, or he has a turn, right? So he's on the couch. She comes in. She admits to being a bit nuts. So she's, but and then she's uh crazy, but then she's not crazy in an entirely victim way. She victimizes other people, and I just found myself reflecting. One of the insights we keep getting into Hollywood that is that women are the victims, and there's actually a theme here of where women can be very tragic victims. So there are themes of rape in this novel, and there are themes of what you would call physical sexual assault. There's a climactic scene where a crowd crushes people and men are taking advantage of women in that crush. So there is a theme of exploitation of women, which we've seen in other novels, and yet that is balanced out by something which a lot of feminists would find uncomfortable, which is that women are exploiting the system too. They are exploiting men. They are using their sexuality to get parts in Hollywood, and in Faye Greener's case, she is using her sexuality to get rent, so free rent. So she's living with somebody, exploiting her sexuality while she's cheating on various people, and she certainly uses her her visual appearance to manipulate. So I just wanted to stress that common theme in the era of these particular novels. We're seeing this commonality where women are victims, but they are also exploiting their sexuality to get ahead.
No doubt, because that's all she's got. She's not the brightest
Yes.
bulb, and she's only 17 or 18 years old too. How much life experience can you bring to a role? You're not Betty Davis. You're not even uh, choose your blonde bimbo, Jean
Yeah, she's
Harlow.
not
Although
even. Yeah,
she was a decent
she's not
actress.
even B list, right? She's not even B list yet.
No, no. There's a line. There's a line in there that West puts in the mouth, and now we should mention the the sort of the third person narrator of the novel is a fellow named Todd Hackett. So it's West telling the story of Faye Greener, her father, Harry Greener, various other characters that we'll get into through the eyes of Todd Hackett. And Todd is actually, I would argue, a very good third person protagonist because he's an artist. So he sees things with an artist's eye. He sees color. There's a lot of vivid color in this novel. I had to look up some of the names for the colors he was using. He has a good eye for composition. He has a good eye for the grotesque, the absurd. So I think this is a wise choice on West's part to have the narration through the eyes of Todd Hackett. And at one point in the voice of Todd Hackett, West says that she was such a bad actress where she was just basically, in a cheesecake roll, reclined on some sort of divan, and she had like a beer in her hand. I don't know what kind of film role that was when you're a harem slave or something, but she had one line. It was like, "Oh, hello," and she couldn't even say that correctly. Right. So this is a no talent, pretty girl with stars in her eyes, and her conniving and her using of people is so almost ingenuous, because this is the world she's been brought up in. Her father, again, a third-rate vaudevillian. She grew up in a family of actors, apparently, going back a couple generations, even beyond her father. So this is just the way her world works. So we're describing her as despicable, and yes, I think so at a certain level, but I don't even think that West sees her that way, because she is, you're talking victim and victimizer. She is more of a victim, it seems to me, in West's view. And I would share that, actually. She's just a kid, and she's just using what she's got, like every one of us. And because she don't got much, she's just using her sexuality. That's the way she's got to get a role. That's the way she's going to get her foot in the door and become a big-time actress. At least that's her dream.
Yeah, well, I agree with everything you're saying. Let's qualify a couple of things, just make them a bit deeper. So she is maybe oblivious to her own manipulation of other people. She's either too stupid or too unempathetic to realize what she's doing. Although there are points where she backtracks on her nastiness. So she is described as nasty. So Todd is the narrator for one of the quotes I'm going to read here. And by the way, just on Todd being a narrator, I think we should add that there's kind of a second narrator, which is Homer Simpson, and that is the character's name, dear viewers. That is precedes Homer Simpson of The Simpsons, which presumably that's where it comes from. But Homer Simpson, he is a narrator, at least when we meet him in Waynesville. We actually meet him through Todd, because he's excuse me, he's hanging around Faye Greener's home. Todd discovers him hanging around with flowers, and then the next chapter gives us a backstory from Todd's perspective, and there are lots of points. From Homer's perspective, and there are lots of points where we switch to Homer's perspective on Faye. So Homer is a bit crazy himself and has deluded perceptions of Faye Greener. So I think of Homer Simpson as a secondary narrator, and we'll talk about how that ends. It doesn't end well for him either. But anyway, Todd is the narrator here, and I wanted to introduce Homer to the viewers, because Homer is a character in this quote. So Faye, Homer, and Todd have gone to a bar at Faye's insistence. And the quote is, "Faye was in a nasty mood. When the waiter took their order, she insisted on a champagne cocktail for Homer. He wanted coffee. The waiter brought both, but she but she told him, that's the waiter, told him to take the coffee back. Da, ba, 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 ba. He opened his mouth to reply. So this is Homer. So she keeps badgering Homer to drink. She does it. She says at one point she distrusts anybody who doesn't drink alcohol. And by the way, Homer is trying to play along. So Homer is this very internalized man from apparently from a conservative part of Indiana. It's Indiana, right? Wayneville, Indiana, I think it was.
I think it's Iowa. I'm not
Iowa.
sure. Yeah.
My bad. I'm sorry, Indianans, Iowans. I just alliterated your state. No disrespect to Iowa because I love Iowa as it happens. Iowa. So he's from Iowa and he seems to consider that he has socialization problems. She's forcing him to drink. So he opened his mouth to reply, and she poured the brandy into it, then clapped her hand over his lips so that he couldn't spit it back. Some of it came out of his nose. And then it goes on. I remember Faye saying to him, "Oh, sloppy boy." She's making fun of him. She's just horrible. She's despicable to him. And Todd is the one who's describing her in a nasty mood. So she can be nasty. And just to balance this out, with I keep coming back to this yin and the yang of how women are depicted in this series. Women are victims and victimizers. Now, Todd has this internal monologue where he's thinking of raping her, and he pulls back from this fantasy, but it is a fantasy where he talks. The first time he talks about it, I'll read it. If she would only let him, he would be glad to throw himself now, no matter what the cost. But she wouldn't have him. This is a great insight or commentary on Hollywood. She didn't love him, and he wouldn't further her career. She wasn't sentimental, and she had no need for tenderness, even if she were capable of it. So that's a real. I think that gets to the heart of Faye Greener right there. And then
Yeah.
later on, he fantasizes much later on. He fantasizes a rape where he this is him narrating. He said he would be lurking in the dark in a vacant lot waiting for her, and he would wait for her to park a car, and he would jump on her, and he's fantasizing about it. But these are rape fantasies. They're uncomfortable. Todd is he doesn't act upon these things, but there is this running theme, and then we're going to see at the end there is sexual assault. Not rape. But by the way, we should balance that out because in the crowd, I remember there is Todd is the observer of this what's happening in the crowd. So he's crushed up against a girl who is in distress, and her dress is torn, and it's only when the crowd moves a little that he realizes that there's an old man. It's described as an old man who's on her. He's upon her. He's biting her, and he's got his hands inside her dress. And she's telling him to stop. And Todd does make him stop by hitting him on the head. That is balanced out by another observation of different women inviting the men to come upon them,
Yeah.
making a joke out of it. So, there's that yin and the yang again of the two roles of women, both sexually open and as sexual victims.
Right. And back to Faye again. And if I may, Bruce, now you can always edit this out if it goes on too long, my reading, but there's an extended passage here which might give people an idea of, not only who this Faye Greener is, and you quoted something from the book already, but West when he's writing well. Now, I want to help my fellow writers here. Here's a good passage. Here's West doing a good job describing Faye Greener. Here it is. Do you work in pictures, Mr. Este? She asked. Now, Claude Este is another character in this novel. And in contrast to most all of the other characters, he is successful in Hollywood. He's a successful screenwriter. He lives in an antebellum mansion. He plays the role of kind of antebellum plantation owner. It's kind of funny. And so she's talking to this fellow now. Do you work in pictures, Mr. Este? She asked. Yes, he said. You're in pictures, of course. Everyone was aware of the begging note in his voice, but no one smiled. They didn't blame him. It was almost impossible to keep that note out when talking to her. Men used it just to say good morning. Not exactly, but I hope to be, she said. I've worked as an extra, but I haven't had a real chance yet. I expect to get one soon. All I ask is a chance. Acting is in my blood. We Greeners, you know, we're all theater people from a way back. Yes, says Mr. Este. She didn't let Claude finish, but he didn't care. Not musicals, but real dramas, she said. Of course, maybe light comedies at first. All I ask is a chance. I've been buying a lot of clothes lately to make myself one. I don't believe in luck. Luck is just hard work, they say, and I'm willing to work as hard as anybody. You have a delightful voice, and you handle it well, he said. He couldn't help it. Having once seen her secret smile and the things that accompanied it, he wanted to make her repeat it again and again. I'd like to do a show on Broadway, she continued. That's the way to get a start nowadays. They don't talk to you unless you've had stage experience. She went on and on, telling him how careers are made in the movies and how she intended to make hers. It was all nonsense. She mixed bits of badly understood advice from the trade papers with other bits out of the fan magazines and compared these with the legends that surround the activities of screen stars and executives. Without any noticeable transition, possibilities became probabilities and wound up as inevitabilities. At first, she occasionally stopped and waited for Claude to chorus a hearty agreement, but when she had a good start, all her questions were rhetorical and the stream of words rippled on without a break. It goes on, but that's a little bit of a taste of West and his style. And Miss Greener, so she's just taking stuff out of the fan magazines, out of the newsreels she's seen, out of her own imaginings, how an actress should be by watching people like Greta Garbo and Marlene Dietrich. So I see her personality as being a despicable one, but I don't see her as being entirely guilty of that personality, as it were. Having been a kid in Los Angeles in this Hollywood milieu, I know the pressures that come to bear in your way of thinking and how you just repeat a lot of stuff that you have picked up. And she seems like she's doing that, and she's just trying to get ahead. So anyway, not to defend her, but that's sort of, the girl.
Yeah, I see what you mean. She's kind of acculturated in that, in those expectations and normalization of how you achieve those expectations. We mentioned it in other novels where the culture, the local culture, particularly in Los Angeles, is, if you're not making it, there's something wrong with you. If you're not prepared to do anything, you got to be, you got to drop your ethics and your morality. You got to, you have to sleep with the producer. Then that's what it's going to take. If we may talk about Joan Schwartzman and Mrs. Jennings, because let's start with Joan Schwartzman. I said her first. She just appears and then she disappears. This is one of the stylistic problems I have with West's writing. I find it incoherent. I mean, some of the chapters just jump, like what the hell was the point of that last chapter? Because it actually doesn't, it's not necessary to the narrative or the character development or anything. It's just kind of anecdotal. It's almost like a short story, and then you got a new chapter, it's kind of short story, and the characters sort of jump in and out and they disappear, and you're thinking, what was the point of that? I mean, but Joan Schwartzman is one of those characters which just drops out, but she's interesting as an anecdote, sort of pass over it, and I remember her. So Joan Schwartzman is this girl. She's got a very strange description. She's a girl, but she's looking for smut. It's another negative depiction of Hollywood women. But let me read you this quote. So Schwartzman was a big girl with large hands and feet and square bony shoulders. She had a pretty 18-year-old face and a 35-year-old neck that was veined and sinewy. Her deep sunburn, ruby colored with a slight blue tint. Oh, God. Kept the contrast between her face and neck from being too startling. And then this is quotes. This is her talking. Well, I wish we were going to a brothel this minute, she said. I adore them. And then later, she pointed to the group of men with whom Claude was standing. Are you talking smut? I just adore smut. And there's no backstory to explain why Joan Schwartzman was behaving like this. I mean, is this it's implicitly it's like this is just a class of women that Hollywood produced who were very ballsy, smutty, sunburn, just balls out, brassy. You'd call it brassy, I suppose. So Joan Schwartz, let's have your comments on Joan Schwartzman. Then I want to talk about Mrs. Jennings.
Yeah, she stood out to me too. I liked her character. She reminded me of kind of a Carol Lombard character, if you know her. She was married to Gable. She died in a plane accident in 42 when war started. I think he threw her in just for a little bit of Hollywood color. That's the only explanation because, yeah, she doesn't return after that. After she enters the scene in this party, and then they go on to see a pornographic film at a brothel, which actually then breaks the film. The film breaks down before they get to the real smutty part. And this is interesting because this happens a lot. Well, I don't know a lot, but on 3 or 4 occasions, I think, in the novel, that like West draws back from like a climax. He's saving it for the big one at the end. And of course, we have the madam of the brothel where they go to see this smutty film, Mrs. Jennings, and she's like a high class madam, and she reputedly doesn't let her girls sleep with any man that she herself wouldn't sleep with. It's a pretty high standard, or maybe it's a low standard. We don't know, but she comes across as a very high class madam for this Hollywood call girl service that she's running.
Yeah.
And then there is, of course, the stage mother of this little brat of a kid. His name is Adore Lumis.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't even have to describe her. She's your pushy, ambitious stage mother, as we have all come to know them, if not personally, through literature and elsewhere. She's so young. It's almost she's almost absolved of guilt for her very frivolous and sometimes destructive actions.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't think there are any heroines in Day of the Locust, whereas in Sammy Glick's world, we had one woman who was successful and
Kit.
was in
Yeah.
control. Kit.
Yeah.
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 So if she was going to sleep around, it was for good reason in her own mind. And she made a success of herself as a single woman in Hollywood. We don't have any of that sort of class of woman in Day of the Locust. They're just, they're just victims passing through, or they're they're of vice. They're of vice. They have vice.
Kit also has smarts. She's a screenplay writer, and there are no women here who display any real smarts.
Apart from Mrs. Jennings.
She's a smart businesswoman,
Yeah.
but in terms of intellect of the type that Kit has, no, they all are in the sex trade,
Yeah.
directly or indirectly, it seems.
Yeah.
As an
Yeah.
actress, sleep your way to the top, or just show a lot of cheesecake on the screen, or you are a madam, or you are a stage mother. You're pushing your son into kind of a white slavery trade. We all know the Judy Garland story, right? She became addicted to drugs, to amphetamines, because of Louis B. Mayer making her work these outrageous hours at MGM to crank out those musicals, to put butts in seats.
Yeah.
And they're all very mercenary, these women, and even Faye, but I think again to a lesser degree because she's just doing what she feels she was born to do and what she's learned to do. So
Yeah. Well, let's make the connection between Faye and Mrs. Jennings, because Faye does go work for Mrs. Jennings when she needs money. So Faye
Yeah.
chooses to be a whore, and there's a very sort of casual discussion of it. So Faye is in discussion with some other woman her age, apparently, and another one of those characters that just appears and disappears for no with no backstory or end story. And the both of these girls are discussing, well, why don't you go work for Mrs. Jennings? Yeah, I probably should have done that before. It's just so
Yeah.
casual. And Todd is horrified. Todd says to Faye, I'll give you the money. I'll loan you the money. If you need money, I'll loan you the money. You don't have to go to Mrs. Jennings. And Faye's attitude is, no, why would I borrow money when I can earn it on my back? Pretty much. So
Yeah.
I've got a good quote on Mrs. Jennings, and then we'll get to Maybelle Loomis, the mother of Adore Loomis. So there's one good quote. This is one of those quotes where I admire Nathanael West's writing, because he really gets to the heart of a character with a single paragraph. So Mrs. Jennings, this is the quote: Mrs. Jennings had been a fairly prominent actress in the days of silent films, but sound made it impossible for her to get work. And instead of becoming an extra or a bit player, like many other old stars, she had shown excellent business sense and had opened a call house. She wasn't vicious, far from it. She ran her business just as other women run lending libraries, shrewdly and with taste. The charge was $30 for a single night of sport, and Mrs. Jennings kept 15 of it. So whether this is tongue in cheek or not, Nathanael West seems to admire Mrs. Jennings. She has sound business sense, and if it takes opening a call house to make money and taking 50%, what's wrong with that sort of thing? That's the sort of posture of the novel's position on Mrs. Jennings, at least.
They're flesh peddlers, Hollywood. Uh, they make no bones about it. I think, they have always been, upfront that sex sells, and they're trying to sell a product. And this is the name of the game. So why shouldn't there be a good whorehouse you can resort to now and again? And why shouldn't actresses, if they aren't, if they're between jobs, make a little pocket money
Yeah,
at Mrs. Jennings' place? I mean, yeah. So I think that's maybe the matter the matter of fact tone you might be detecting in the in the narrative voice, that we're going into this scene with eyes wide open here. We know what's going on here. So if you're going to be working in Hollywood, you might as well play by the rules, and the rules are no rules. We talked about that before with Sammy Glick, and
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. There was prostitution in Sammy Glick's world, and Dave the Locust is making the same point. It's difficult for me to really, without knowing Nathanael West, it's difficult for me to know whether he's really depicting a real Hollywood. Is this Hollywood really? People are just casual about prostitution. They're just so casual about it that women, aspiring actresses, just dip in and out of it. Uh, and there's the porn movie. So they, like you said, they end up watching this French porn movie. I should note that there's quite a discomforting narrative plot in that porn movie. And I'm going to make another stylistic point about this novel, which I found I disliked, is that Nathanael West can make it's a short novel. It's a really, really short novel. There aren't many chapters, but some chapters will dwell on some things. Like in this case, the porn movie pretty much makes up the chapter. And there's a lot of detail about the narrative in the porn movie. And it's a bit like the chapter I was most uncomfortable with, the cockfight. It goes into incredible detail about the cockfight, how the cocks were wounding each other, and how the handlers were resuscitating the cockerels, the roosters, by, tickling their testicles was one of the phrases that Nathanael West uses, sucking the blood out of their comb. I was just like, God, you're going into such detail on that, and then you're not giving us sufficient detail on the actual characters themselves. So that's a stylistic problem. But the porn movie is described as French, and there's a narrative where there's a maid. There's a talk about a stereotype. There's a French maid in a French porn movie, and I can quote it. It was evident that while the whole family desired Marie, Marie being the maid, she only desired the young girl. And I found this uncomfortable because the young girl implicitly is an underage girl, and the underage girl comes to the bedroom of the maid, and there appears to be some sexual interaction. And again, I find it difficult to understand West's point. Was he again? He's sort of making it casual. There's implicit paedophilia being depicted in this movie, and yet Nathanael West just sort of depicts it as if everybody's taking it in their stride. Nobody's saying, "Well, hang on, we got children in this movie. I don't want to watch that." Or Todd, the narrator, doesn't say, "Well, I was uncomfortable with that part of the movie." The movie just fails. Like the real doesn't work, or so it breaks, doesn't it? The real breaks. So he can't describe, Todd cannot describe what actually happens in it. But I'm just mentioning it again because there are lots of cases where I was getting annoyed by the jumpy narrative and the excessive detail in some chapters on episodes that were not fundamental to the narrative, and then the sort of depiction of things which should be morally uncomfortable, but yet are there's no comment. There's no comment from the author or from Todd, the chief narrator. There's no comment about this, and and I guess there's a third point which I mentioned, which is I find it difficult to evaluate the realism of the novel. Is this really how Hollywood was in the 1930s, where all of what middle America would consider utterly immoral and unacceptable was just as casual? Was it as casual in the 30s in Hollywood as Nathanael West depicts here?
Well, you've come to the right place, Bruce, because I wrote an epic poem about Errol Flynn, who was the golden boy of the late 30s and early 40s in Hollywood. And I can assure you that Hollywood was very casual about these matters, indeed. And in fact, many of our viewers will already be anticipating me. He went up for a double statutory rape charge in 1942, 43, and he got off. Pardon the
Yeah,
pun.
I forgot that. And we
But
should mention Charlie Chaplin too. I mean, Charlie Chaplin was
yeah,
he was dating
and added,
girls.
right, and so and added to that, Flynn at his Mulholland house up in the Hollywood Hills overlooking the San Fernando Valley, he he had habitual every week he had cockfights. So this was a Hollywood thing, both the casual sex, and the brutality uh, when it comes to cocks at least. And so yes, to your query, yeah, this as far as I understand it, this was Hollywood. It's Sodom and Gomorrah, and Flynn had a good time until he didn't, until he got caught with his hand in the cookie jar. And then his life at that point, 42, 43, he was found innocent by a jury, I might add, of I think it was 9 to 10 women. They found him innocent, and but his at that point his career kind of was on the downslide, and it was a slow and yeah, slow and very. He basically drank himself to death at the age of 50 in 1959. So this again, I would add one other thing. We talked about in the Bud Schulberg "What Makes Sammy Run" video how the Schulberg was trying to portray the winners as the losers, And I argued that someone like Sammy Glick, he's a winner in terms of his success in the Hollywood movie industry. However, morally, he's bankrupt, and he's not even getting any kind of real satisfaction from his work because he steals his work. And here I would say it's Nathanael West portraying the losers mostly. Most of them are losers, people trying to break into the business, or they're in the business, but they're at a very low level and they're not happy. They would like to ascend the hierarchy. It's West describing the losers as losers, not only externally, but internally, that there's a moral corruption here. And he doesn't say it explicitly, you're right. He rarely even indicates that there might be some discomfort on the part of Todd with these goings on. But I think that's sort of the general thrust of the book, uh, along with the idea that you have a lot of sort of ghoulish voyeurs, the masses, who are looking in on these Hollywood insiders and taking a certain pleasure in the sensationalism that they see in Hollywood. And he talks about it right off the bat in the first couple pages, where Todd's walking down Hollywood Boulevard and he's seeing all these people just standing around with hatred in their eyes. And later on, there's a funeral. It's the funeral of Faye Greener's father, the third-rate vaudevillian. He dies of a heart attack, whatever. And then they in the funeral parlor, there are all these spectators in the last rows, and they're not friends, acquaintances, or family of Harry Greener, the corpse. They're just people who have come in off the street. Why, we don't know. But at a certain point, they leave, and then Todd says to himself, well, I guess there was a star walking by and they wanted to see the star. So you got all these masses of people that also in the book, West describes them as having come to California to die. And this is a big theme of his, that not only do you have these morally bankrupt Hollywood types, but you have these people who have come out from the Midwest. He's very specific about that. The Midwest, Iowa, elsewhere. Don't want to pick on Iowa, but he mentions that explicitly, and this is where Mr. Simpson's from. How they have retired to California. These are older folks, it seems, and they are now looking forward to that hedonistic retirement that they dreamed of, with all the orange trees and the sea breezes and everything. But once they arrive, there's none of that, at least as they imagined it in their dreams. It's just more of the same. And so you have all these people who are just basically coming to California to exist and vegetate and to get ghoulish, voyeuristic pleasure looking in on the Hollywood scene. And it's a very damning critique of Los Angeles and its people, and maybe even the American dream as well. And I'll say one last thing. I have to very virulently disagree with West on who Los Angeles are. I don't think they're a bunch of zombies who have just come out from the Midwest, who are here to, I'm speaking of here, I'm in Berlin at the moment, are coming out to LA to become leeches, to become parasites of the rich and famous. that wasn't my experience of LA in the 60s, 70s, and 80s growing up, even people who came from elsewhere. But maybe this was the case in the 30s. Could be, but not my
Yeah.
experience.
I'm going to read that passage that you've alluded to. I think on that last point, the people who come to California to die. I suppose there was the way I was thinking of that was California was the Florida of the 1930s. So there was the cost of living was not so prohibitively high as it is now that only the rich could go and retire there. So I imagine that lots of people from the Midwest, tired of the cold or the inland air, could go to California to die. They could afford to do so. And in fact, this Homer Simpson, who is a bit of a loser, he can afford to go to California. And in fact, he can afford to keep Faye Greener in his little home too, in the Hollywood Hills, pretty much. I think that actually Santa Monica Hills, close enough.
Santa Monica Mountains and the Hollywood Hills, they're
Yeah,
basically synonymous, but we're at
yeah.
the eastern end of the Santa Monica Mountains, so Hollywood Hills, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you and I would struggle to rent a teeny place there now. So the way I interpreted this was that it was affordable enough for retirees to go to California in the same ways that retirees go to Florida to die, to quote Nathanael West. So let's talk about Los Angeles because you made this, you recall this quote. I noted this. The most Los Angeles comment was actually on Vine Street, Los Angeles, which I thought was funny. It actually made me think more of Santa Monica than downtown Los Angeles, but you know. So the quote is there's various quotes here. A great many of the people wore sports clothes, which were not really sports clothes, but were fancy dress. Scattered among the masqueraders were people of different types. Their clothing was somber and badly cut, bought from mail order houses, while the others moved rapidly, darting into stores and cocktail bars. They loitered on the corners or stood with their backs to the shop windows and stared at everyone who passed. When their stare was returned, their eyes filled with hatred. At this time, Todd knew very little about them except that they had come to California to die.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and it goes on. I mean, when he starts to walk up, Vine Street into the hills to his place of residence, one of these many canyons which crease the Santa Monica Mountains. So, but not even the soft wash of dusk could help the houses. Only dynamite would be of any use against the Mexican ranch houses, Samoan huts, Mediterranean villas, Egyptian and Japanese temples, Swiss chalets, Tudor cottages, and every possible combination of these styles that lined the slopes of the canyon. When he noticed that they were all of plaster, lath, and paper, he was charitable and blamed their shape on the materials used. Steel, stone, and brick curb a builder's fancy a little, forcing him to distribute his stresses and weights and to keep his corners plumb. But plaster and paper know no law, not even that of gravity. And he goes on, and he ends by saying, it is hard to laugh at the need for beauty and romance, no matter how tasteless, even horrible, the results of that need are. Whatever. Okay. Anyway, but it is easy to sigh. And he ends, few things are sadder than the truly monstrous. So he describes this this potpourri of architectural styles in the Hollywood Hills as monstrous. And here I beg to differ with Mr. West. I what is he seeing? I mean, monstrous? It's kind of cute. It's at best, or at worst rather, it's tasteless, as he says. Okay, tasteless. But who's to say that this is ugly? Who's to say that this is anything more than tasteless? He finds it monstrous. And by the way, when he talks about they were all of plaster, lath, and paper, what he means is that they're basically wood frame stucco houses. That was those were the building materials in the 20s and 30s, largely in Los Angeles at that point. And you know something? They are great for earthquakes. They are very flexible. They give, they sway. I've been in a couple. They actually do that. And if you, Mr. West, want to build houses of stone and brick, you're going to die in one of those in an earthquake. So I got my back up a little bit with this architectural critique. Hey, it's historicism, man. It's all kinds of
Yeah.
different styles from all kinds of different epochs. Haven't you ever been to the Ringstrasse in Vienna, man? Neoclassicism, cheek by jowl with Neo-Baroque, with Neo-Renaissance, with Neo-Gothic. Come on. And I thought, this is a sophisticated New Yorker. He's kind of bitchy, you know what I mean? And he opens up in the first pages with this bitchiness about seeing all these people walking on Vine Street, and they're wearing sweaters and knickers and slacks and blue flannel jackets with brass buttons, guys in yachting caps, Tyrolean hats, and the girl in slacks and sneaks with a bandana around her head had just left a switchboard, not a tennis court. Well, it's California, man. We could dress anywhere we want because we got sun. So he seems like a real spite-filled Easterner, and I objected to these initial pages. And he's coming in with a very, very negative attitude from the get-go, and that's where I particularly dislike this book. It's not the Los Angeles I recognize. It's some hotshot Eastern guy who thinks that he knows everything there is to know about every subject, not only fashion, but architecture, and he's going to read us the riot act. Well, screw you, pal. So that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I think, I mean, in defense of how Californians were dressing, the climate behooves you to dress sporty. So you've got many layers because it can be very cool in the morning and it can get very hot in the sunshine, and then the sun goes down and it gets cool again. So sporty wear is quite appropriate. And as you know, in 30s Hollywood, sporty wear was still extremely stylish by standards of our age. So when he's talking about sport clothing, that would be sports jackets. So light tweed jackets, nice tailored slacks, and maybe a tie and a nice buttonhole and all sorts of things. So they would look very, very smart, but they would have flexible wear for the climate. So it was appropriate for one thing, and that parallels your point about the architecture or the materials of the architecture are appropriate to the risks of earthquakes. Now, having said that, I did make notes about the same notes as you did about the architecture, because I think this should be part of the canon of great California novels, because every single California novel we have read has a critical commentary on the architecture, that it is faux, that it is inauthentic, and it borrows styles from far afield. You remember Evelyn Waugh, his horror at the concrete and glass and steel, and also the copying of English manners and German castles. And every single novel, including What Makes Sammy Run, it has commentary on faux European style. There's the Tudor. I think it's Sammy ends up buying a mock Tudor mansion in Hollywood. So I think that should be part of the canon.
Yeah, it's definitely in line with those other books. You're right. And I will only add this, though, that we in Los Angeles, we did have our own style, our own styles back in the 20s and 30s. Art Deco, man. No one did it as well as we in Los Angeles. Okay, give you all out there an idea of what Art Deco is. So we'll get out of Los Angeles briefly. New York, the Chrysler Building, Empire State Building, right? Well, we in 1928, our city hall was built. And that is a classic example of Art Deco, right? It was kind of stepped, skyscraper with all these very longish windows.
Yeah.
And it's City Hall, the Art Deco City Hall in Los Angeles has become its symbol in the meantime, and became that symbol very early on with all the films being made in Los Angeles, and particularly the film noir in the 40s and early 50s, where you would always have the cops or the detective going into City Hall. So that's a classic example. It was staring him in the face the whole time. All right,
Yeah.
Mr. West. And also we have, and then we had our own version of Art Deco. Okay, you say Art Deco doesn't come from Los Angeles. Okay, good. But we were building a lot at that point, expanding the city. And Art Deco in the 20s and 30s, that was the style of the time. And then we had something called Streamline Moderne, all right? So this is a real LA style. One of the guys who did Streamline Moderne was the guy who designed the Oscar statuette. Give you an idea, right? So it's basically Art Deco with much cleaner lines, more geometrical in its figurations. As an example, okay, so he has no he can't get any traction with me with this very jaundiced view of LA architectural styles. And then, of course, we can talk about the post-war period, the 40s and 50s, where you get these beautiful, glass houses sort of along Frank Lloyd Wright lines.
That's a good point, and I think actually it's a criticism we could make of all the novels we've discussed here is that they do not address Art Deco. They don't notice Art Deco, and you're right, it's big. I mean, you mentioned the town hall. I can think of the Central Railway Station in Los Angeles too. Beautiful materials, very Art Deco. The yellows. A lot of the inspirations are Egyptian, ancient Egyptian, or Mesoamerican. So you got those stepped designs which they took from the Mesoamerican pyramids, and then the flattened two-dimensional profiles of persons and animals, very ancient Egyptian, and then the colors, very ancient Egyptian. So those turquoise and purples, golds, lots of yellow backgrounds, and we see it in the movies because a lot of the movies were stylized in Art Deco too. So yes, it's funny. I hadn't thought about it, so thank you for bringing that up because we can criticize all these novels for not having any appreciation for Art Deco. By the way, Art Deco was big in Florida at the same time. So you might say that there's something about southern coastal states with the climate, the tolerance of the colors, because Art Deco is very colorful too. There's something probably about the light, the quality of light, the ocean colors, the Mediterranean colors that encouraged Art Deco in those states, where in other states like New York, as you mentioned, the Chrysler Building, it's less about color; it's more about chrome and muted brown bricks in the case of Empire State Building. So yes, that's a very good point. I'll just segue from there to point out that where West goes is where a lot of these novelists have gone, which is what they call the Spanish style. So they do note that while they ignore Art Deco as a California thing, they keep coming back to the style being very Spanish. So it's Spanish colonial, Evelyn Waugh talks about Spanish colonial. It's actually talked about Samoan huts effectively too, which Nathanael West talks about. So they both observe those within a decade of each other. I did note this quote of Homer Simpson's home, that Homer Simpson's home in the canyons that he eventually chooses. I'll just read it. The prevailing taste had been followed in the living room. It was Spanish in quotes. The walls were orange flecked with pink, and on them hung several silk armorial banners in red and gold. A galleon stood on the mantelpiece. Its hull was plaster, its sails paper, and its rigging wire. And in the fireplace was a variety of cactus in gaily colored Mexican pots. Some of the plants were made of rubber and cork, others were real. The room was lit by wall fixtures in the shape of galleons, with pointed amber bulbs projecting from the decks. The table had a lamp, blah, 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 blah. Now, I interpreted this as a negative comment. So I think you have clarified this for me that Nathanael West is not giving California style any credit at all, even when he's describing Spanish. The Spanish style, it's faux. Everything is faux, right? Its whole was plaster. It sails paper. The plants were made of rubber and cork. It's just faux for him. He's got no appreciation of how beautiful Spanish colonial style can be and how appropriate it can be to the light and the heat. So low roofs that extend out to give shade to the patios, or the what we call the what do we call them in California? We don't call them patios. We call them
we call them patios, indeed.
Do we? Okay, I wasn't wrong there.
he calls it a patio too in the book, by the way.
Yeah, very Anglo language. Yeah, so he's got no appreciation in the Spanish style either, which I think other novelists have more appreciation for. But I do have to acknowledge where I do appreciate his criticism of the faux-ness, and that is where this is very Las Vegas. So the way we think of Las Vegas now, where everything is copied architecture and it's flamboyantly, it's in your face, it's just outrageously, unapologetically stolen style, and very and ostentatious. It's ostentatious. It's kind of that Las Vegas now is kind of how Nathanael West is depicting California in the 30s. It's the Las Vegas of its time. So he has another quote I noted on the quarter. Sorry, I said that wrong. On the corner of La Huerta Road was a miniature Rhine castle, a miniature Rhine castle with tar paper turrets pierced for archers, and next to it was a little highly covered shack with domes and minarets out of the Arabian Nights. Right, so clearly this is taking fantasy too far in your architectural stealing. And then there's the Cinderella bar, quote, a little stucco building in the shape of a lady's slipper on Western Avenue. Its floor show consisted of female impersonators. So, when the style is being that ostentatious and that inauthentic, yes, I can share the criticism.
Yes, I understand. For me, it's just fun. Maybe I don't take architecture seriously enough. But
you're right. You're right. I think that's fair. It is fun. It is fun.
I take humans and their interactions seriously, but I'm not going to get all moralistic on you about some make-believe Rhine castle in the Hollywood Hills. It's part and parcel of the whole thing, and maybe that's what he's saying. But I could never get too out of sorts looking at these things. I've seen them, all the time, all my life. I've seen these things like, it's kind of cute. What is it? Oh yeah, you have a little discussion about it. And one thing regarding the Spanish in quotation marks style, all he had to do was go into the Roosevelt Hotel, which is across the street from Grauman's Chinese Theater, which is where his final scene actually takes place. He just had to go across the street where the first Academy Awards were held. And you have a beautiful Spanish hacienda style lobby, right? It's sort of like the interior of Union Station that you alluded to. You have these beautiful iron chandeliers and beautiful tile floors. What do you want us to do? What do you want from us? I mean, this is our heritage. It used to be Mexican, okay? It used to be Spanish before that. This is native to California. Didn't he get around? Didn't he see any of these things? Okay, good. He's writing a novel. He's focusing on these things, but it doesn't mean I have to enjoy his little interlude, taking pot shots at LA's architecture. But I will say this, that he does a great job when he takes us on a little tour of what you're alluding to now, this Potemkin's kind of mix and match village of the backlot. That's great. That's great. And if I may, can I read a little bit from that, Bruce? I've been so negative about Mr. West recently. Anyway, he's running after Faye. He sees her on the back lot, and he was running after her. He's trying to find her. The sun was very hot. His eyes and throat were choked with the dust thrown up by the horse's hooves, and his head throbbed. These horses are heading off to a recreation of the Battle of Waterloo. The only bit of shade he could find was under an ocean liner made of painted canvas with real-life boats hanging from its davits. He stood in its narrow shadow for a while, then went on toward a great 40-foot papier-mâché sphinx that loomed up in the distance. He had to cross a desert to reach it, a desert that was continually being made larger by a fleet of trucks dumping white sand. He had gone only a few feet when a man with a megaphone ordered him off. He skirted the desert, making a wide turn to the right, and came to a western street with a plank sidewalk. On the porch of the Last Chance Saloon was a rocking chair. He sat down on it and lit a cigarette. From there, he could see a jungle compound with a water buffalo tethered to the side of a conical grass hut. Every few seconds, the animal groaned musically. Suddenly, an Arab charged by on a white stallion. He shouted at the man, but got no answer. A little while later, he saw a truck with a load of snow and several Malamute dogs. He shouted again. The driver shouted something back, but didn't stop. Throwing away his cigarette, he went through the swinging doors of the saloon. There was no back to the building, and he found himself in a Paris street. It goes on, right? That was nice. We go on for another page or so. He's taking us on a tour through these facades, these temporary sets. And that is a nice, I think, metaphor for Los Angeles. Yes, again, it's this sort of, as I said, mix and match dreamscape. And although he calls it a dream dump in this passage, he calls it a dream dump. So again, his negative attitude on pretty much everything. Why I like Schulberg's treatment of Hollywood better than West is at least there's quite a bit of humor in What Makes Sammy Run. You can say there's humor here, okay, but it's very subtle. It's like when they describe Kafka as being humorous, right? I don't like Kafka. West reminded me of Kafka, very dreary, very glum, very gloomy, very drab. Lots of boring passages, as you say, not only the cockfighting one, but there's that chapter where Harry Greener, the washed-up vaudevillian, father of Faye Greener, it takes him like 15 pages to die. It's like, can we move on? It's a book in my version of 165 pages. It's about 1/10 of the book, just waiting for this guy to die. I think at a certain point, he didn't have enough material, and he was just milking it. And but he does this whole backlot metaphor for Los Angeles very well. I like that.
Yeah, I got a couple of quotes here which I think can build on what you're saying here. So the first thing is I've got a quote by some unnamed characters at a party, which ironically condemns Nathanael West's attitude towards Hollywood, his Eastern attitude, as you described it earlier. So at the party, there are some Hollywood types talking, and one of them is overheard to say, "Guys like that come out here, make a lot of money, grouse all the time about the place, flop on their assignments, then go back east and tell dialect stories about producers they've never met." It kind of that comes very early in the book, that quote. So it kind of sets up the novel as if it's going to be sympathetic to the Hollywood, the true Los Angelino, or the immigrant who loves California, who appreciates California's virtues, not necessarily without turning a blind eye to its vices. And yet, the rest of the novel is Nathanael West really dumping on everything about California. There's nothing good coming out of it. So I thought that was interesting. It's almost like he uh he is unaware that he is of that type. He is unaware that he is of that Eastern snobbish, blinkered, myopic type that he is criticizing, or his characters are criticizing. Um, so I'll just pause. You can comment on that. I'll just add another quote because you reminded me of this whole Napoleonic war movie, right? They're at Waterloo, and actually, this is the part I appreciated most. I thought actually that was funny. I agree with you that it's not a very funny book. It's funny almost in a sort of dry sort of acerbic way. It's funny because it's making fun of people, and you can find that funny. Most of the time, its commentary is very very negative in an unfunny way, but its depiction of the filming of a Napoleonic battle is actually funny because it's so satirical um and the dryness works. The dryness of the humor actually works here. So the novel actually begins with that Napoleonic army marching towards the set. So an army of cavalry and foot was passing. Actually, when you open the novel like that, it's actually confusing. What is this novel about? You actually, you don't realize until a few paragraphs in that it's just a movie being made because he sort of frames it as you are actually observing the Prussians and the French and the English. You're observing them because he's describing them that way. But the first part I laughed was where there is a producer screaming through a small megaphone, "Stage 9, you bastards! Stage 9!" I actually thought that was very
Yeah.
funny. That was on the first page or the second page or something. I thought, oh, this is a comedy. This is very Evelyn Waugh. I'm going to laugh a
Yeah.
lot at this. And unfortunately, that was the last laugh. But I'll just add that much later in the novel, and this is a problem where it becomes he returns, he circles back to the filming of the Waterloo battle. It's actually so it's like almost 90 pages, 90 pages later. He circles back in a novel of 160 pages. He circles back to this Napoleonic scene where he really should have brought that together and really anchored the novel in that because it was funny and it was engaging and it's making it's a metaphor for Hollywood, the fakery, and when the fakery fails, because what happens is, I'll read it. When the front rank of Milhaud's heavy division started up the slope of Mont Saint Jean, the hill collapsed. The noise was terrific. Nails screamed with agony as they pulled out of joists. The sound of ripping canvas was like that of little children whimpering. Lathe and scantling snapped as though they were brittle bones. The whole hill folded like an enormous umbrella and covered Napoleon's army with painted cloth. It turned into a rout. ... The armies of England and her allies were too deep in scenery to flee. Now, this is clever. This is clever description. It's a clever metaphor. I liked it. It just, I go back to there are stylistic and structural problems. There's the structural problem. Why is this 90 pages later than when he introduced the damn battle scene on the first page?
I didn't think of that, Bruce, but you're absolutely right. I think it would have really bolstered the structure of the novel had he given this as our springboard into the whole world that we're going to inhabit for the next 160 pages. You're right, because it starts off pretty weakly, actually. We get up a head of steam, and then he brings us down to down to Vine Street and all these observations about the people who came to California to die. Kind of a downer, right? Get us out off on a a high note, as it were, then bring us down. But that Waterloo scene, that is what this scene that I read earlier segues into. He wants to find Faye, and she is dressed as some kind of French girl at the time, and he figures she'll go to the Waterloo battle, and she is there or was there, but she doesn't appear in any scenes. And then we have that whole great description. I mean, they're good lines. As you said, there's some very dry humor here. One-liners like, would Grouchy or Blücher arrive? Grothenstein, the producer, might have changed it, right? So this little comment about, well, they might change the Battle of Waterloo here. Like this, they do these things, And then another line like, the French killed General Picton with a ball through the head, and he returned to his dressing room. Good stuff. You're right. Very good stuff. I think when he talks about the Hollywood scene directly, which we have a lot of in What Makes Sammy Run, that he doesn't come in for our critique of being kind of gloomy and dour and a downer, right? I mean, as you say, there are many longueurs in this novel. There are many very depressing passages. But that is one where we want to keep reading. We want to keep reading about that world, right? But then he brings us back into this world of losers and hangers-on and other marginal elements.
Yeah,
So,
we should know that the whole Waterloo thing is incongruous. It is not necessary to the novel as a whole. It seemed to
no,
me like he had written this metaphor, he'd sort of tossed it off as this is a good metaphor for Hollywood, and it was light-hearted and witty, unlike the rest of the novel. And he was maybe he was thinking about a short story. It was just something he wrote and he thought, I'll use that later. And then he ends up inserting it into this particular novel. It's totally unnecessary. I liked reading it. I thought it was fun. It's the funnest part of the novel, but it's totally unnecessary to the novel. It's not. None of the characters in that Waterloo scene uh, are involved. I mean, it's just. I mean, Todd is sort of an observer. It's just like an anecdote. It's just sort of set at best. It's setting the scene, and then it's split 90 pages, separated across the novel, so it loses its impact. It gets back to the structural problems I had with the novel. It's jumpy, jumpy, jumpy. It's going back and forth. You're like, oh God. And there's so many characters in such a short novel. It's difficult to keep track of them, and they just don't necessarily add to the story itself or to the message. It just does seem like a jumble of short stories mashed together, which a lot of novelists are guilty of too. So we talked in another video about Evelyn Waugh's Handful of Dust, which is a very difficult novel to read. It is self-admittedly a mash of short stories, and the short stories are very incongruous. So it goes from an English manor house to the Amazon jungle, and it doesn't really work. It's a tragedy. It goes from one tragedy to another. So there is that sort of arc, but that sort of structural jumpiness did remind me of Evelyn Waugh's worst work. Still, his worst work is still pretty good work, but anyway, that was my structural problem with it.
he is a brilliant writer, uh, intermittently. He doesn't sustain it throughout the 165 pages because I don't care how much of a wordsmith you are, but if you are boring me repeatedly, that does not speak to the brilliance of your writing, right? And that happened on several occasions with me. And I make notes in my books. It's like I go like, this is tedious. I'm skipping. I want to skip paragraphs here, right? And I got that a lot with Mr. West. However, some of his descriptions are really lovely. I will give you one or two, and that's basically all I have to say about the book, and then you can take it from there with our child actor and race. But he he's very good in describing characters, Okay. Uh, for example, I'm trying to find it now. Yes, there's this fellow named Earl Shoup. We mentioned him. He's a movie cowboy, and he's a real cowboy, it seems, as well. He's from Arizona, so from someplace else. And there's a description of him. He was over 6 feet tall. The big Stetson hat he wore added 5 inches more to his height, and the heels of his boots still another 3. His pole-like appearance was further exaggerated by the narrowness of his shoulders and by his lack of either hips or buttocks. The years he had spent in the saddle had not made him bow-legged. In fact, his legs were so straight that his dungarees, bleached a very light blue by the sun and much washing, hung down without a wrinkle, as though they were empty. Todd could see why Faye thought him handsome. He had a two-dimensional face that a talented child might have drawn with a ruler and a compass. His chin was perfectly round, and his eyes, which were wide apart, were also round. His thin mouth ran at right angles to his straight, perpendicular nose. His reddish tan complexion was the same color from hairline to throat, as though washed in by an expert, and it completed his resemblance to a mechanical drawing. Now, that's some very good writing because it conjures a very stark mental image. And he does that with the personalities, I thought, quite well. So that's an example of some good writing in terms of physical descriptions. And I'll just give one more. And this is, he's good at describing action. I think his description of the riot at the end of the book is pretty hair-raising. I mean, he gives us a very real feeling of what it's like to be in a crush of people, which I have never been actually, but I felt the confinement, I felt the danger. Here is another example of his writing about action, and this is where Faye, we mentioned how she has many suitors. One of her suitors is a Mexican fellow named Miguel, and he is this cockfighter, okay? And they're dancing. They've had a few tequilas, and they're dancing around a fire. The Mexican stood up, still singing, and joined her in the dance. They approached each other with short, mincing steps. She held her skirt up and out with her thumbs and forefingers, and he did the same with his trousers. They met head on, blue-black against pale gold, and used their heads to pivot, then danced back to back with their buttocks touching, their knees bent and wide apart, while Faye shook her breasts and her head, holding the rest of her body rigid. He struck the soft ground heavily with his feet and circled her. They faced each other again and made believe they were cradling their behinds in a shawl. Earl, our cowboy from Arizona, Earl pounded the skillet harder and harder until it rang like an anvil. Suddenly he too jumped up and began to dance. He did a crude hoedown. He leaped into the air and knocked his heels together. He whooped, but he couldn't become part of their dance. Its rhythm was like a smooth glass wall between him and the dancers. No matter how loudly he whooped or threw himself around, he was unable to disturb the precision with which they retreated and advanced, separated, and came back together again. So I think that's some good writing. But again, you got to put it together over 165 pages, and particularly in a book as disjointed as this one, the prose has to carry you through, and it falls down on the job, as I said before, with lots of very boring passages.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we could say to the viewer, you should read this, but be prepared to skip read it. Don't expect a coherent narrative that's going to pull you along chapter to chapter. Just skip through it and find the good writing and enjoy the good writing, and just take it as a jumble. Just take it as a jumble rather than a wholly good, great novel. Uh, it's not holistic in that sense. You've just reminded me that just on the on the particular good writing, you reminded me, I think, that the good writing is always around Faye and her effect on the men around her. That's when the writing is very quick, smooth, lucid, efficient. It's very efficient, and you're not bored. It's very pictorial. It moves fast. You really get the sense of what's going on. There's a lot of body language. He's communicating to you what these people are thinking through body language, even though there's very little dialogue. Actually, that you could say that about the whole novel. For a novel, there is actually very little dialogue. It's a lot of description, observational description of people through their body language and their backstory. Now, when Faye interacts, particularly with Homer Simpson, that can be nasty. We have insights into each of them. Again, that's when the writing is best. And I'm thinking particularly of the climax in their relationship, Faye and Homer, is where Homer wakes up one morning. This circles back to Miguel because he hears Faye moaning and he thinks that she is ill. Guess what's coming next, right? He's knocking on the door saying, "Can I get you an aspirin? Can I get you a drink of water?" The moaning stops, and then it starts up again, and she's not saying anything, and eventually the cowboy Earl he comes to the door, and I think Homer by this time has twigged that she's making love to Miguel. Oh, because he goes into the room and he sees the two of them, and she just pulls the cover over her head and she won't talk to him. But he continues to live the lie to himself. He's telling himself the lie. He's in cognitive dissonance. He continues to tell himself the lie. She's just ill. So Earl comes to the door and says, "What's going on?" And Homer says, "Oh, she's ill. I'm going to go get her an aspirin." And Earl isn't believing that, and he goes in. And they start to have a fight. Miguel and him have a fight because they have been competing for Faye's attention, and she's chosen Miguel after a drunken party, and Homer has slept in. And I thought that writing was very insightful into people's body language and how these individual characters, given their backstory, would react to it. Like the cognitive dissonance in Homer Simpson is very authentic. I appreciated it. So I think there must be something in Nathanael West's own background that made him good at writing about a fae as the Venus to a lot of satellite men. And presumably, that background is that Nathanael West had himself been a planet in planetary orbit around a Faye Greener. And
Yeah.
he's good at writing about it because he experienced it. That would be my assumption.
Yes, or he's just saw so much of it in Hollywood because, as I said at the opening, uh, she seems like a poster girl for every would-be starlet of the era, and I agree with you about the best passages being about her. And if I could read one, it's not too long. He says that she lay stretched out on the divan with her arms and legs spread as though welcoming a lover, and her lips were parted in a heavy, sullen smile. She was supposed to look inviting, but the invitation wasn't to pleasure, but to struggle, hard and sharp, closer to murder than to love. If you threw yourself on her, it would be like throwing yourself from the parapet of a skyscraper. You would do it with a scream. You couldn't expect to rise again. Your teeth would be driven into your skull like nails into a pine board, and your back would be broken. You wouldn't even have time to sweat or close your eyes. And there's another passage where he says, because she goes through she has all these affected gestures and little phrases. He says, had any other girl been so affected, he would have thought her intolerable. Faye's affectations, however, were so completely artificial that he found them charming, which I would argue he should find the architecture in the Hollywood Hills equally charming. Being with her was like being backstage during an amateurish, ridiculous play. From in front, the stupid lines and grotesque situations would have made him squirm with annoyance, but because he saw the perspiring stagehands and the wires that held up the tawdry summer house with its tangle of paper flowers, he accepted everything and was anxious for it to succeed. Interesting little psychological insights as well into why a woman, a young lady, 17, 18 years old, who is just, she's got a nice figure, she's pretty, should be so attractive to men, should be such the femme fatale, why she should exercise such a fascination. So I'm sure you're right. He either was in orbit around one of these little would-be starlets or femme fatales, and or he just saw so many of them in his work as a screenwriter on the studio grounds that a figure like Faye just she emerged naturally in his writing. He didn't even have to think about it too much.
Yeah. Well, we should mention that Faye, the men Faye is attracting are pretty much losers, right? Because they're basically homeless. First of all, Homer Simpson takes her in out of a foolish love interest. He seems to think that or he seems to hope that he'll win her over by having her in the house and being generous. And actually, there's a passage we haven't mentioned where the author describes him as being so endearing that it actually repels her. That he's trying so hard, he's bringing her breakfast in bed, he's fawning to her, and it actually provokes her to be meaner because he's such a sap. But and actually the passage goes on to say his reaction to that is to become more so because he's going to win her over by being more servile, I think the word is. So he's a loser. And then Earl and Miguel end up living in the garage, remember? Because they are homeless. They're living out in the desert. I can't remember how it. I mean, I don't think that the story adequately explains how they all know each other. But they are homeless. They end up in the garage. That's where the cockfight happens. Homer doesn't like it, and Todd is saying to Homer, "You need to kick them out." And Homer is avoiding the issue. Where are they going to go? They're all losers. You end up with three people, three men living in a house with Faye Greener. They're all attracted to her and they're all jealous of each other. It's an impossible situation. It's going to end in a fight and it's nearly murderous. So they're all losers. I mean, Faye is the center of a loser's universe, which kind of lowers her standing. Right, she is pretty, but remember, she hasn't made it in Hollywood as an actress. And actually, the passage you just read, where she is reclining on that divan, not in an inviting way, but in a sort of in a dangerous sexual way. I thought that spoke to why it proved to me why she is not making it in Hollywood. She's not a good actress. She's only got one mode of acting, which is this highly sexualized, manipulative, dangerous way of acting. She can't do seductive because she's only got sexual, right? In that case, so that's an insight into why she doesn't get another calling to be that extra in that particular role, at least. So she's gonna. So I think she is a loser. She is a loser. She's a Hollywood loser. She's not going to make it in Hollywood. She doesn't have the acting talent or the good character, and possibly she doesn't even have the manipulative arts to make it. So she's prepared to sleep around. She's prepared to prostitute herself, literally, but not in a sufficiently politically artful way to get ahead, like some of the women we saw in What Makes Sammy Run. So thank you for provoking me to make those realizations. I'll just add a quote from Faye Greener because I do want to try to uh, persuade viewers that this novel can be funny. And Faye Greener does have some stupid lines. So her stupidity is actually very funny at
Yeah,
times.
it
And
is. Yeah.
this one is great. This is about halfway through. She is at a party or something. She says she's making small talk and she says, "They say fat women are going to be popular next year. Do you think so? I think it's just publicity for Mae West." That's really funny. And Mae
Yeah.
West was still alive at this point. It
Oh,
reminds me of in what
making pictures too.
what makes Sammy run. He makes Sammy makes some horrible remarks about actors who are still alive, including Greta Garbo, who he calls Greta Garbage.
Yeah, yeah. Let's not come down too hard on Faye. Yeah, she does have a well, but it's probably an unintentional sense of humor.
It
Uh,
is.
in fact, it is. Yeah, but they are all losers, and you can include Todd in that one as being a loser. You mentioned Homer and Miguel and Earl, but Todd too. I mean, any guy who falls for a 17-year-old girl like Faye, there's got to be a losing element in your character. Okay, truly. By the way, 17, he makes it clear that she's 17, going on 18. Maybe she turns 18 in the course of the book. But this is a woman who is working officially for a whorehouse, and she's also going out to bars and getting drinks. I mean, talk about loose, a loose town, not a loose girl necessarily, although she's that too. But talk about a very loosey goosey town. And
Yeah. And a
it doesn't
pedophilic
conflict.
town, right?
It doesn't conflict with what I know of Hollywood at that time either, as I
Yeah.
said before.
And it's a pedophilic town. So you're right. There's actually four men circulating around her. Todd is distinguished by these rape fantasies. So he's a loser. He's not going to get her, and it's unclear what he's getting out of California. In fact, he's not going to get her, and when he fantasizes about it, it is in the most despicable way. And the novel does not close out his any commentary on his rape fantasies. I suppose that in the climax, we're in that crush, that crowd. Uh, Todd is seeing women getting abused or opening themselves up to abuse. I suppose that might be interpreted as clarifying for Todd how to treat women because he's fantasized about it but not acted upon it, and then he saved a girl from an older predator in that crowd. So you might think, well, there's a conclusion to the novel. That is the conclusion to the novel. The novel helps to clarify to Todd how to treat women, but it's unclear. I mean, the conclusion to the novel is unclear. It just sort of ends with that crowd, and we haven't talked about it, but um, this will segue onto the little boy adore Loomis because poor Homer Simpson has a nervous breakdown about seeing Faye with Miguel, and he is in his pajamas, carrying a suitcase into Los Angeles, looking for a train to go back to Iowa, and he's clearly out of his mind. He's sort of staring blankly, and he doesn't know where he's going. And Todd sees him coming, and Todd is trying to help him, and puts him on a bench, and then Adore Loomis is going to throw stones at him, and it's going to end with Homer Simpson stamping on this boy, this 8-year-old boy. It's unclear how much damage he does, but it seems the crowd is so the narration breaks off from Todd is watching Homer stamp on the boy, but the narration breaks off without any description of the injuries inflicted. Although there are allusions in the crowd talking about some nutcases has gone mental and but maybe the police have got hold of him or something. So let's segue to Adore Loomis because it's a very curious ending for this little boy. This little boy, I felt very sorry for him. He is described as a little boy of 8 years old. Let's introduce Maybelle Loomis, who is his mother, and I've got one quote from her which really illustrates Nathanael West's commentary both on women in Hollywood and also on California. So he's got a real love hate mostly hate relationship with California because he makes fun of people who like California. And Maybelle Loomis is one of them because she is asked, "Do you like California?" And she says, "Like California?" She laughed at the idea that anyone might not like it. It's paradise on earth. And that comment for Nathanael West, it's very like his commentary on Faye Greener's dialogue, monologues. He makes her sound stupid. So Faye Greener is stupid. She's funny because she's stupid. And Maybelle Loomis is stupid in this novel, and not just stupid. She is then very self-centered. Uh, what would be the right word? She's as a mother of a child star. She is living through her child. She's careless with her child. Um, so let's just quickly let me describe, read this quote about Adore Loomis, which I think is really going to get to the heart of that character, Adore Loomis, the 8-year-old, and then let's have your commentary on him. So he is described as a little boy appeared, dragging behind him a small sailboat on wheels. He was about 8 years old, with a pale, peaked face and a large, troubled forehead. He had great staring eyes. His eyebrows had been plucked and shaped carefully. Except for his Buster Brown collar, he was dressed like a man in long trousers, vest, and jacket. He tried to kiss his mother, but she fended him off and pulled at his clothes, straightening and arranging them with savage little tugs. End of quote. That distressed me. That distressed me as a man with an 8-year-old boy. It distressed me that she was resisting his affection. She was plucking his eyebrows for Christ's sake. An 8-year-old, that's disgusting. And he seems troubled, and he's going to end up. He's always going AWOL, and he's going to end up throwing stones at Homer Simpson. So he's troubled in aggressive ways as well as being troubled in clearly a sensitive, underloved, and overprotected way. Poor child, right? Who would want to be a child star in Hollywood? What do you think?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be. And she also sexualizes the kid because she has him sing this very body kind of blues number. It seems something you could imagine Bessie Smith or Ma Rainey singing. Mama don't want no peas and rice and coconut oil, he sings. Just a bottle of brandy handy all the day. Mama don't want no peas. Mama don't want no coconut oil. His singing voice was deep and rough, and he used the broken groan of the blues singer quite expertly. He moved his body only a little rather than in time with the music. The gestures he made with his hands were extremely suggestive. Mama don't want no gin because gin do make her sin. Mama don't want no glass of gin because it bound to make her sin and keep hot and bothered all the day. He seemed to know what the words meant, or at least his body and his voice seemed to know. When he came to the final chorus, his buttocks writhed and his voice carried a top-heavy load of sexual pain. This is an 8-year-old kid. So yeah, I share your critique of the stage mom. And I think West does too here. I mean, he wouldn't describe it so objectionably if he didn't want us to feel objections to it. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
bad news. Yeah.
yeah, it's bad. It's bad news. I mean, Hollywood is so sexualized that it's extending down to little boys and girls. I mean, at the end of the day, Faye Greener is still a girl legally, uh, even in the state of California.
Yep.
And it's extended all the way down to 8-year-old boys. He has been clearly been trained by an adult to express himself this way. He has not intuited the sexual interpretation of this song. He's been trained to do it, which speaks to
Yep.
these bad adult influences, including his mother. It's a terrible commentary on the stereotype of the stage mother. I found it very uncomfortable, that whole thing, and but let me have your comments on the ending though, because
Yeah.
we I did mention how it ends. So Adore Loomis throws stones. He ends up getting stamped on, and then the novel sort of Todd is sort of dragged off with the crowd, and it's unclear what happens after that. I mean, how did you interpret the ending?
Well, it's the punchline to his thesis of the gray masses who have migrated out to California and are sorely disappointed in what they find or don't find, and they become hateful and vicious. And I can read this. This is important because I think this is really the statement of his thesis, what he's most concerned about. And we're talking again about this end scene and about all these people milling about and waiting for the stars to appear in their limousines and go up the red carpet to it's Grauman's Chinese Theater. He doesn't use that name in the book, but that's what he's talking about. It was, and all these people, they're pushing and shoving, and they're just a bunch of voyeuristic ghouls. It was a mistake to think them harmless curiosity seekers. They were savage and bitter, especially the middle-aged and the old, and had been made so by boredom and disappointment. All their lives they had slaved at some kind of dull, heavy labor behind desks and counters, in the fields and at tedious machines of all sorts, saving their pennies and dreaming of the leisure that would be theirs when they had enough. Finally, that day came. They could draw a weekly income of $10 or $15. Where else should they go but California, the land of sunshine and oranges? Once there, they discover that sunshine isn't enough. They get tired of oranges, even of avocado pears and passion fruit. Nothing happens. They don't know what to do with their time. They haven't the mental equipment for leisure, the money nor the physical equipment for pleasure. Did they slave so long just to go to an occasional Iowa picnic? What else is there? They watch the waves come in at Venice. There wasn't any ocean where most of them came from, but after you've seen one wave, you've seen them all. The same is true of the airplanes at Glendale. If only a plane would crash once in a while so that they could watch the passengers being consumed in a holocaust of flame, as the newspapers put it. But the planes never crash. Their boredom becomes more and more terrible. They realize that they've been tricked and burn with resentment every day of their lives. They read the newspapers and went to the movies. Both fed them on lynchings, murder, sex crimes, explosions, wrecks, love nests, fires, miracles, revolutions, wars. This daily diet made sophisticates of them. The sun is a joke. Oranges can't titillate their jaded palates. Nothing can ever be violent enough to make taut their slack minds and bodies. They have been cheated and betrayed. They have slaved and slaved for nothing. So they revolt in this riot. People are groped, beaten, trampled, maybe even killed. And the final line is Todd Hackett being taken away in a police car, and with the siren going, they're going to take him home. He's been injured. And then he himself replicates the sound of the siren. He starts going, he's been driven nuts. End of novel.
End scene.
Roll
That's right.
credits.
Roll credits. Yeah. Yeah. So when I thank you for reminding me of that passage where the the populace is so cynical that the oranges and sun and waves no longer interest them. I was
No
thinking,
way.
for Christ's sake, go for a hike in the hills, go walk on the beach, go, go appreciate the natural beauty of California and all that California had to offer before Hollywood brought its vices. I mean, you don't have to live solely within the Hollywood bubble. You know, not through stars, not through the magazines, how the magazines tell you to behave, or what the news should be. I just thought it's an extreme. Nathanael West has again an extremely negative interpretation of Californians here. which I thought went too far. I realized that unfortunately there are people who um, live their lives through stars and believe anything they read about stars, and they're incredibly narrow-minded and boring people for it. And you could say that about pretty much any Los Angelino when they start talking about their work in Hollywood. It becomes very boring very quickly because
Yes.
it's all about, well, I did work with so and so and I met so and so, and okay, that's but it's inconsequential to me. I was there because I was in a think tank and dealing with war and foreign policy and terrorism, and I was quite far removed from that world. So it's a fair commentary, but I did think, this is pretty extreme, Nathaniel. Nathaniel, for God's sake, let's have
Uh,
some Californians who do enjoy living in California for the natural beauties, etc. Which is how I loved California before it was ruined by ridiculous politics, taxation, crime, traffic, etc.
yeah. Yeah. This boy needs a good talking to, Nathanael West, from a true Angelino, because this is not, again, maybe it's the 30s, maybe there's a different breed back then, but I doubt it, because I knew lots of grandparents and great aunts and uncles. They were of age in this period, and I knew their friends and cousins and everything else. I never found Angelinos, whether they came from Iowa or whether they were fourth generation like myself. I never knew them to be hateful and vicious. They might have lived through Hollywood. Granted, I make that argument too. I have in past videos. Hollywood dominates the cultural scene. It did back then, perhaps less so, I hope. But you did, try to emulate the look of certain stars, how they dressed, how they walked, how they talked, even unconsciously. There was that. They were royalty, right? Okay, good. But it didn't consume your entire life, all right? And you didn't become vicious and bitter because of it. The Angelinos I knew and grew up with, and even from that era, older ones, they were all very nice people. Tell you the truth, nicer than Easterners for the most part, more open and gregarious than Midwesterners. And if you could say anything negative about them, and I have said negative things about my ex fellow citizens, it's that often, sometimes they'd be a bit lost, if they were newly arrived, for example, or yeah, maybe they did want to make it in the industry. They had these vague ambitions, but never driven to the point of hurting someone or betraying someone's trust or doing anything that could be termed vicious again. No, this vision of Los Angeles as a zombie apocalypse, I do not share with Mr. West. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's just he missed out a whole class of Californian that you alluded to, which is the happy, very smiley, positive, the sunny Californian. Where is the sunny Californian in this novel? I mean, there is the class of vicious, exploitative, insider, but very internalized, self-obsessed, ambitious class of Los Angelino whose eyes are just on Hollywood. Even if they're not working in Hollywood, they're obsessed. They cannot see past Hollywood. But I'm not disagreeing with his identification of that class of people. He just ignores the sunny Californian, who is more naturalistic and natural and more authentic. And I also should say that class is dying out. When I got there in the 2000s, it was still there, but those people have emigrated, like I did, to places like Texas because they couldn't
Or
stand
Berlin.
or Berlin, right? You were the trailblazer, young man. Uh,
Yes.
yeah.
Go east, young
So I
man.
think
Go east.
Go east, that's right. That's oh, what a tragic comment on California. Everybody used to go west and now they're going east. They really are, yeah, and they're leaving behind a different class of Californian. So it's not the same. It's not the same. But yeah, we have made some realizations here in studying a book, talking about a book that um doesn't hit all the right buttons in its depictions of California. It has nevertheless stimulated us to bound and conceptualize California in a deeper way ourselves. I think so. We have benefited from that.
Indeed. This is the fifth time I have read it. How do you like that? I recommended that we do this book after having already read it four times. Uh, it it's a necessary read for anyone who's interested in
Yeah,
Los Angeles and or Hollywood mid-century, and it's in
yeah,
the canon. So it's like even if you don't uh, like Dostoevsky, I guess you got to read Crime and Punishment, right? So this is the same thing, and it's kind of Dostoevskian in terms of its long-winded and often boring passages. And I already compared him to Kafka. And I want to say one last thing. This is sort of a cult novel, and I would argue that it's a cult novel for the same reason that people like James Dean become cult figures. It's because just a year after this book was published, 1939, West died in an auto accident. And early deaths for authors, actors, and other artists, that if you've written anything that's at all worth reading or done a movie at all worth seeing, and if you know the through the concatenation of events, people are looking for a star, someone to latch onto, to some conquering hero to hail, well, then you might just become a cult figure. And this novel, The Day of Locust, I think has become a cult novel for that reason. He didn't live to write any further novels. So this is a death cult. And I will end by saying that the name of the main figure for me, Todd Hackett, uh, in German, Todd, T-O-D, Tod means death. And I'm sure he didn't choose that accidentally because Todd is a rather strange name for that era. You didn't hear it much. And he being Jewish from New York, and his original name being Natan Weinstein, changed to Nathanael West, uh, I'm sure he had some knowledge of the German, if only by virtue of his exposure to the Yiddish, which I'm sure he was exposed to. So I think he knew what he was doing with Tod. And then ironically, he died a year later.
yeah. Good point. I didn't know that. That's very interesting. I tell you what, my final comment is, Kevin, talking with you, brilliant as you are, every time you make me realize things about the novel I hadn't realized until you raised something or added an observation to what was still sticking in my mind. So I appreciate very much that you introduced me to this book and that you have made me think about it more deeply than and at my first reading. This was my very, very, very first reading. My first reading was confused and sometimes um, despairing and despairing, particularly of the structure, and maybe frustrated. I was often frustrated with this novel, but talking with you, you have made it uh, more understandable, more contextualized. So I very much appreciate that, sir. Thank you for that discussion.
Well, I can only return the compliment, Bruce. And I think the comment about the Waterloo section in the middle having better served the book at the very beginning as a springboard into it, as opposed to slowing everything down in the middle of it, albeit a very brilliant passage, was a brilliant remark in and of itself. So I thank you for that. So
You're too kind. Thank you.
I had read that was my fifth reading of the book. I had never thought of that. That's the point. Yeah. I'm giving you all these cool insights, you say, whatever, but after having read it 5 times and you just one time you give me this very cogent critique, I think. So anyway.
Thank you, sir. That's very kind. I mean, if he'd stuck with the Waterloo metaphor, it would have been a different book, wouldn't it? It would have been a satire and a funny one, a consistently funny one. But yeah,
it would have maybe put him in a better mood
yeah,
as he wrote it too.
yeah. We have been honest with our viewers. This is the book that he wrote, and this is the jumble and the good and the bad. And we have been honest with you, dear viewers. Please read it. It is in the canon, and we
Yeah.
have prepared you for what will frustrate you and confuse you. And we
And
hope we have helped.
and it's mercifully short. That's the point.
It is very short. Yeah. All right, Kevin. Thank you so much.
Okay.
It's been an honor
Okay.
again. Thank you, sir.
Likewise. Thanks a lot.